What then is the righteousness which is of God by faith?
It is simply the thing that God wants every man to be, wrought out in him by constant obedient contact with God himself. It is not an attribute either of God or man, but a fact of character in God and in man. It is God's righteousness wrought out in us, so that as he is righteous, we too are righteous. It does not consist in obeying this or that law, not even the keeping of every law, so that no hair's breadth did we run counter to one of them would be righteousness.
To be righteous is to be such a heart, soul, mind, and will as, without regard to law, would recoil with horror from the lightest possible breach of any law. It is to be so in love with what is fair and right as to make it impossible for a man to do anything that is less than absolutely righteous. It is not the love of righteousness in the abstract that makes anyone righteous, but such a love of fair play toward everyone with whom we come into contact that anything less than the fulfilling with a clear joy of our divine relation to him or her is impossible. For the righteousness of God goes far beyond mere deeds, and requires of us love and helping mercy as our highest obligation and justice to our fellow men. Those of them, too, who have done nothing for us, those even who have done us wrong. Our relations with others, God first and then our neighbor in order and degree, must one day become, as in true nature they are, the gladness of our being. And nothing then will ever appear good for us that is not in harmony with those blessed relations. Every thought will not merely be just, but will be just because it is something more, because it is live and true. What heart in the kingdom of heaven would ever dream of constructing a metaphysical system of what we owed to God and why we owed it? The light of our life, our sole, eternal, and infinite joy is simply God, God, God. Nothing but God and all his creatures in him. He is all and all, and the children of the kingdom know it. He includes all things. Not to be true to anything he has made is to be untrue to him. God is truth, is life. To be in God is to know him and need no law. Existence will be eternal godness. You would not like that way of it? There can be no other. But before you can judge of it, you must know at least a little of God as he is, not as you imagine him. I say, as you imagine him, because it cannot be that any creature should know him as he is and not desire him. In proportion as we know him, we must desire him, until at length we live in and for him with all our conscious heart. That is why the Jews did not like the Lord. He cared so simply for his Father's will, and not for anything they called his will. The righteousness which is of God by faith in the source, the prime of that righteousness, is then just the same kind of thing as God's righteousness, differing only as the created differs from the creating. The righteousness of him who does the will of his Father in heaven is the righteousness of Jesus Christ, is God's own righteousness. The righteousness which is of God by faith in God is God's righteousness. The man who has this righteousness thinks about things as God thinks about them, loves the things that God loves, cares for nothing that God does not care about. Even while this righteousness is being born in him, the man will say to himself, "Why should I be troubled about this or that? Does God care about it? No. Then why should I care? I must not care. I will not care." If he does not know whether God cares about it or not, he will say, "If God cares I should have my desire, he will give it to me. If he does not care I should have it, neither will I care. In the meantime I will do my work." The man with God's righteousness does not love a thing merely because it is right, but loves the very rightness in it. He not only loves a thought, but he loves the man in his thinking that thought. He loves the thought alive in the man. He does not take his joy from himself. He feels joy in himself, but it comes to him from others, not from himself. From God first, and from somebody, anybody, everybody next. He would rather, in the fullness of his content, pass out of being, rather himself cease to exist, than that another should. He could do without knowing himself, but he could not know himself and spare one of the brothers or sisters God had given him. The man who really knows God is and always will be content with what God, who is the very self of his self, shall choose for him. He is entirely God's and not at all his own. His consciousness of himself is the reflex from those about him, not the result of his own turning in of his regard upon himself. It is not the contemplation of what God has made him. It is the being what God has made him, and the contemplation of what God himself is and what he has made his fellows that gives him joy. He wants nothing and feels that he has all things. For he is in the bosom of his Father, and the thoughts of his Father come to him. He knows that if he needs anything, it is his before he asks, for his Father has willed him, in the might and truth of his fatherhood, to be one with himself. This then, or something like it, for words are poor to tell the best things, is the righteousness which is of God by faith. So far from being a thing built on the rubbish heap of legal fiction called vicarious sacrifice, or its shadow called imputed righteousness, that only the child with the child heart, so far ahead of and so different from the wise and prudent, can understand it. The wise and prudent interprets God by himself, and does not understand him. The child interprets God by himself, and does understand him. The wise and prudent must make a system and arrange things to his mind before he can say, "I believe." The child sees, believes, obeys, and knows he must be perfect as his Father in heaven is perfect. If an angel, seeming to come from heaven, told him that God had let him off, that he did not require so much of him as that, but would be content with less, that he could not indeed allow him to be wicked, but would pass by a great deal, modifying his demands because it was so hard for him to be quite good, and he loved him so dearly, the child of God would at once recognize, woven with the angel's starry brilliancy, the flicker of the flames of hell, and would say to the shining one, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Nor would there be the slightest wonder or merit in his doing so. For at the words of the deceiver, if but for the briefest moment imagined true, the shadow of a rising hell would gloom over the face of creation. Hope would vanish. The eternal would be as the carcass of a dead man. The glory would die out of the face of God. Until the groan of a thunderous no burst from the caverns of the universe, and the truth flashing on his child's soul from the heart of the eternal, immortal, invisible, withered up the lie of the messenger of darkness. But how can God bring this about in me? Let him do it, and perhaps you will know. If you never know, yet there it will be. Help him to do it, or he cannot do it. He originates the possibility of your being his son, his daughter. He makes you able to will it, but you must will it. If he is not doing it in you, that is, if you have as yet prevented him from beginning, why should I tell you, even if I knew the process, how he would do what you will not let him do? Why should you know? What claim have you to know? But indeed, how should you be able to know? For it must deal with deeper and higher things than you can know anything of till the work is at least begun. Perhaps if you approved of the plans of the glad Creator, you would allow him to make of you something divine, to teach your intellect what has to be learned by your whole being, what cannot be understood without the whole being, what it would do you no good to understand save you understood it in your whole being. If this be the province of any man, it is not mine. Let the dead bury their dead, and the dead teach their dead. For me, I will try to wake them. To those who are awake, I cry, for the sake of your Father, and the firstborn among many brethren to whom we belong, for the sake of those he has given us to love the most dearly, let patience have her perfect work. Statue under the chisel of the sculptor, stand steady to the blows of his mallet. Clay on the wheel, let the fingers of the divine potter model you at their will. Obey the Father's lightest word. Hear the brother who knows you and died for you beat down your sin and trample it to death. Brother, when thou sittest at home in thy house, which is the temple of the Lord, open all thy windows to breathe the air of his approach. Set the watcher on thy turret, that he may listen out into the dark for the sound of his coming, and thy hand be on the latch to open the door at his first knock. Shouldst thou open the door and not see him, do not say he did not knock, but understand that he is there and wants thee to go out to him. It may be he has something for thee to do for him. Go and do it, and perhaps thou wilt return with a new prayer, to find a new window in thy soul. Never wait for fitter time or place to talk to him. To wait till thou go to church or to thy closet is to make him wait. He will listen as thou walkest in the lane or the crowded street, on the common or in the place of shining concourse. Remember, if indeed thou art able to know it, that not in any church is the service done that he requires. He will say to no man, "You never went to church. Depart from me, I do not know you." But, inasmuch as you never helped one of my Father's children, you have done nothing for me. Church or chapel is not the place for divine service. It is a place of prayer, a place of praise, a place to feed upon good things, a place to learn of God, as what place is not? It is a place to look in the eyes of your neighbor and love God along with him. But the world in which you move, the place of your living and loving and labor, not the church you go to on your holiday, is the place of divine service. Serve your neighbor, and you serve him. Do not heed much if men mock you and speak lies of you, or in good will defend you unworthily. Heed not much if even the righteous turn their backs upon you. Only take heed that you turn not from them. Take courage in the fact that there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hid that shall not be known.